Boom, boom. 20 bucks. 20 bucks. You're on the line for 20 bucks. Keep on playing. Nobody's paying. I have some nickels and some dimes. 20 bucks. Hi guys, Jabor from Montreal. I hope the weather's better with you than it is with us today. It's cold and it's damp and it's drizzly. Oh, a real winter blah day. So, I'm Maggie and welcome to Mrs. Calabash Cooks, and come into my kitchen. And I've got just the dish for a cold winter's day. You see, I've got the goose pimples. So we're going to make a quick minestrone soup and a cheese and bacon bannock. Now, the cheese and bacon bannock is an old Celtic recipe. And the minestrone soup, it's not a traditional one. It's a quick soup. It's what you would have in the cupboards. And so on a day like today, you get up and think, oh, I need something warm and comforting. You can go to your cupboard and you'll have all these ingredients in there. And with the cheese and bacon bannock, a bannock, I didn't realize, came over to North America in the early 18th and 19th century with the Scottish fur traders. Now, I lived in Ireland and we made bannocks, which is made with a grain. It could be oatmeal, it could be barley, it could be wheat. We put in it, either made it savoury or we made it sweet with dried fruit or fresh fruit. And it was a bread which was cooked, originally it was cooked on the hearth of a fire. So you'd push all your fire back. And this is how I cooked when I first went to Ireland. I didn't have an oven. I had a jack, which you put on and you put your turf on top and at the bottom. And I had a fire. So, and with, I made bricks around so that you got it hot and then you put your casseroles on the back. Excuse me, and then they cooked. And that's why a lot of my cast iron is all black around the edges. And so in Scotland, they had a bannock stone and they would put it on a hot hearth and cook it. Sometimes now it's cooked on a skillet on the top of the oven, or like today, I'm going to put it in the oven. But to begin with, let's make the, what do I get started first? I think we'll do the bannock first. Get that cooking. And it's just pastry. It's like making a short crust pastry. So in here, I've got flour, baking powder, a little seasoning, and some paprika. So let's just mix it together. You could put some herbs in there at this stage. Just mix it together, and butter, which we're going to rub in. You can either rub or cut in. I like to rub in. Look, I'm going to be putting my hands in the pastry, so I'm just going to wash my hands, so come over with me. Just make sure your hands are nice and clean. And we used to make these, a bannock, we would get everything prepared the night before, because when we lived in Ireland, it was back in the 70s, and we were in the middle of the country, literally in the middle of the country, probably a couple of miles away from the nearest little store. And so we didn't eat bought bread or anything like that very often. That was a treat when you went into town to do your shopping. Possibly once a month, because as I learnt very quickly, the boats only came in once a month. And so if you didn't buy it then, the next week when you went in, there was nothing there. So we used to make this up. We get it to this stage the night before and then just mix it together for breakfast. So let me just rinse my hands. I've got the oven on at 450. It's a quick, it only takes about 10 minutes to cook, a bit like a scone mix. I've got 2 eggs. Now, with the amount of liquid, it depends on the flour that you're using, because I'm using an English recipe, and the flours that we have in England aren't as hard as the flours here, so they won't take as much liquid. So I have got a little more milk out on the side, and I'm using, instead of all-purpose flour today, I'm using a slightly softer pastry and cake flour. So we're just going to mix it together. You see, it's going to take a little more. You want to handle it as little as possible. It's like making pastry or scones. A little handling is better than a lot. So I've got some spare flour here. Let's just put some on the board. Flour my hands and pull it together. What we call pull it together, like that. Just so that it forms a dough. Go round the bowl. Make sure you're not leaving anything behind. Now, on January the 6th in Ireland, we used to have a bannock, and it had dried fruit in it, and it had a dried pea and a ring and all different things, different symbols. And we used to have it on the 6th of January on Epiphany, and it was always a really special treat for the kids, because they always wanted to know what were they going to get when they took a mouthful. You know, had they got a ring, had they got this, had they got that. And so it was always it was lovely. So we just want to pull it together like that. Make sure that you keep it in a round. Never roll backwards and forwards, just push it away from yourself like that, and that will be about right. A little bit more, because we want it to be nice and puffy, because we're going to cut it in half and fill it. So I like to cook it on parchment paper, like so. Let's just get rid of that. Now, I always keep one of these in. It's an old ruler, an old printer's ruler, for the size of the font. And it's a steel ruler, which is excellent for cleaning my cooking boards. There we are. Always put the board underneath like that. Rinse my hands again. There we are. And we need to divide that into 8. So let's just wipe down the board. So let's have a look. Scour it. Remember to go fairly deep when you're scouring, because it's going to rise, and that can fill in. And then we're going to take a wedge like that. So that's going into the oven at 450 for about 10 minutes. Oh, excuse me. I've had the flu this week and I'm about 95% back, but it's left me with a runny nose, which is rather annoying. Here we are. So today's meal is ideal for how I'm feeling. I feel as though I need warm, comforting food. Okay, so we've got the bannock made. So we need to now start the soup. And for this soup, I'm making half the quantity of the recipe because there's only 2 of us, and that will still give us 2 good portions. So it will give us 4 portions, so there'll be some left over either for tomorrow or the next day or to put in the freezer. This freezes really, really well. So let's go over to the stove. And on the back here, let's just turn it off and bring it forward. Now in here, I don't know if you can see, but I've got carrots, onions, garlic and celery. And I've chopped it up really, really finely. And when you're making soup, chop your vegetables as small as possible. You need as many cut surfaces as possible. And that means all the flavour goes out. It's just the opposite when you're making a casserole. You need larger pieces. So, where is my bits and pieces? Now, if you have, as I say, this is just what I call a store cupboard recipe. If you haven't got any vegetables in, you live in the country like we do, and sometimes you can't get out because of snow. I always keep frozen macedonian vegetables in, and I use that instead of fresh vegetables if I'm really, really pushed. And I like to what's called sweat my vegetables, so I put them on a low heat with the top on and let them cook gently, and that brings out the flavour. So these are cooked, they're nice and soft. And so I've got a cup of red wine. You can use red wine, white wine, a mixture of the two if you've got them just a little bit in the bottom of the bottle. And we're going to just boil this up until it's reduced a little bit. And that adds a nice subtle flavour. By boiling it, all the alcohol's gone out. But it gives that beautiful mellow flavour. So you see I've got everything down here. We've got the wine. For the mixed beans, I've used a can of mixed beans. I like the different beans. I don't want all kidney beans or haricot beans or chickpeas. I've got a mixture. So this is coming down. Now I've used tomato. I've used carrot, onion, garlic, and celery. If you want to put some mushrooms in, put a few mushrooms in. Not traditional, but if you want a few peas, you've got some peas left over, put them in. So you can see it's reducing. That's reducing nicely. I've got diced vegetables, diced tomatoes rather, which I'm going to add. Now yesterday when I went shopping, I had got some tomatoes in, but not the ones I wanted, so I had to go to town and get some tomatoes. And the large can of tomatoes was, you know, the really big can of tomatoes was half the price of a small can. So I bought a large can. I've taken some out and put put in the soup. I had some for supper yesterday, and I've frozen some. So just look at the price. Just because a recipe says a small can, and that's twice the price of a large can, you know, think about it. You can always freeze a large can of tomatoes, and they always come in. So the tomatoes are there. I'm going to add the beans because I like my beans cooked with it. And beef stock. Now you can use for this, I'm using beef stock today, but you can add vegetable stock if you prefer that to a beef stock. I like a minestrone with the beef stock, but that's just a personal taste. And I've got a bay leaf and some fresh thyme. So let's just rub the thyme through the fingers. This, I know it looks a bit dry, but this is actually growing in, which is laughable, is the dining room, which it was the dining room till Derek started getting cameras, and it's now the studio. But I do still have a little table there where I can grow my herbs. But there's not an awful lot of light, so they're going a little bit straggly. But now remember, if you're using fresh herbs, it's double the amount of a dried herb. So if it says a tablespoon full of fresh herbs, you'd only use half a tablespoonful of dried herbs. They're far more concentrated. This smells gorgeous, actually. So there we are. Now I'm going to taste that because it hasn't got any seasoning in at the moment. And everybody knows I like to add a little bit of seasoning whilst it's cooking and then add some more seasoning later. If you leave it all to the end, it doesn't add the flavour. So this is my special, Mrs. Calabash. 3 of salt to 1 of pepper. And I actually grind my pepper down so it's nice and fresh, and I use a sea salt. So let's just taste this. It's got a nice thymy flavour to it, but it needs just a little more. Don't add too much seasoning at this stage because it's going to magnify as it cooks. So let's bring that up to the boil before I put the top on, and that needs to cook for about 5-10 minutes because everything is cooked, but we need to get the flavour into the beans and into the vegetables. And I've already pre-cooked the pasta. And now for a minestrone, I don't like a big pasta. I like little pastas. And I've already pre-cooked. Now, when you cook your pasta, remember, always put some salt in because you can't add it at the end. It has that flavour of bleh. So add a little salt when you're cooking it. Let's put the top on. That will cook. And something which isn't the normal, I'm adding a little, this is spinach. We need all the greens and the vitamins and everything we can get this time of the year. So I'm adding a little spinach to it. Adds colour and it adds a little bit of taste. Now this is the pasta that I used. So it's only you can see it's very, very small. And I like this type of pasta. It only takes about 8 minutes to cook, and I like this type of pasta in soups and casseroles. Not it's not a pasta for spaghetti bolognese or anything like that, but it just adds a nice flavour. So as I say, this is a very, very quick way of making a minestrone, because a minestrone is put on first thing in the morning and it cooks all morning, so we don't always have time for that. That is cooking. So whilst the Bannock is cooking, let's make the filling for it. So let's go back to the butcher block. Oh, excuse me, I need a drink. And whilst I forget, I'd like to say hi, David. He's been ill and he's watching today. So hi, David. Otherwise, I get carried away and forget. Now for the filling, we've got some butter. Bring it up to room temperature because you want to beat the butter. I cooked some bacon and drained it. And actually, for this, because I'd got some bacon fat, it depends entirely on you. I didn't use the sunflower oil today, but I used some of the bacon fat, and that adds a little more flavour. If you have a cholesterol problem, then yeah, just use your sunflower oil. But I used the bacon fat today. So I cooked that this morning, drained it, cut it up, chopped it into small pieces, and kept it in the fridge. And this is good Irish cheese. And whilst I remember, I forgot to get out my Parmesan cheese for the soup. So let me delve into the fridge. And I bought this Parmesan yesterday, which was already grated. I want to bring it up to temperature. Normally, what I do for Parmesan, and I couldn't find any yesterday, normally for Parmesan, I go to the store, and very often they've got in a little, they're selling it in little tubs. They have the rinds and ends of Parmesan. And I'm only going to grate it. And these are a lot cheaper than buying a piece of Parmesan cheese. So, but they hadn't got any yesterday, so I was reduced to buying some rather more expensive Parmesan. So let's put some of this in a bowl, and then it can breathe and come up to temperature. It is a nice Parmesan. And it's convenient in a sealed container. There we are. So we've got the butter, and before I so rudely interrupted myself, this is an Irish cheddar. It's quite salty, and I like the sharpness of the saltiness against the butter and the bacon. But any strong cheese, you need a really good flavoured cheese, otherwise it gets lost. So we're going to, this is going to make a bit of a noise. Just beat the butter and get a spatula, and we're going to just beat some of the cheese in. bacon, and a little milk. It's the remaining of the milk, but as I say, the flour I was using is quite a hard flour compared to the English flours. So a drop of milk is just to bind it all together. And we're going to taste that. There we are. Get rid of that. Let's just taste that to see if it needs a little pepper. And we're going to spread this in the bannock. I'm going to need just a little pepper in that. Doesn't need any salt, but just a little ground pepper. So we need to make it into a nice spread. I'm going to add just a drop more milk. And actually, whilst you're making the bannock, it was a way, because, as I say, we lived in the country, we couldn't always get a fresh supply of milk. The electricity would go off occasionally, so sometimes, especially in summer, the milk would turn, and this was an ideal way, if you didn't want to make scones, of using the milk that was just on the turn. It's good because it's got more lactic acid in there for it to rise. Let's just clean this, and we'll have a look at this is all ready to spread. We'll go back to the stove, have a look to see how the bannock's cooking and how the soup's cooking. So come back with me. Yes, let's switch that off. Let's have a look at this. Lovely. It's beautifully, look how it's thickened, beautiful. So we're going to add the spinach. If you're using fresh spinach, just cook it, turn the heat up and cook it until it starts to wilt. But this is the frozen spinach, so really we're just going to heat it through. Whilst that's coming up, I'm going to take out my bread. Let me just look and see how that's cooking. Oh. I'm going to leave that in. Let's just put it back on again. Just for a few more minutes. It's a little bit doughy. So turn it round and we'll put it back in the oven for a few more minutes. It's only going to take a few more minutes. So now this is heated through. We're going to add the pasta. You see, it makes a really substantial meal. Ah, I can't wait for supper time. And actually, you know what? It tastes even better tomorrow when all the flavours have mingled. Let's just turn it up. And we've got to taste this now. We've got to do the taste test. It needs a little more seasoning. Definitely. But don't forget, don't add too much salt because you're going to be putting Parmesan cheese on there, which is salty. But for my flavour, it needs a little more seasoning. Just a soupçon, as the saying goes, just a soupçon more. You've got a lot of liquid in there, and it's amazing just how much seasoning it will take. It's nice and herby. Yes, perfect. Let's see, that will now be finished. So, let's just take this back and put it on the board. Now this can be eaten either hot or cold. I'm going to clear some space. I want that to cool for a minute or two. So we're going to dish the soup up. Let's just slide that off if we can. There we are. Whoops. We'll get rid of this. Oh dear. There we are. We'll have that on the board. Ooh, lovely. We'll bring the soup on and its serving bowl. Now, you can either serve it in the pot, just like this, or in a nice serving bowl. I like to serve the Parmesan cheese separately because not everybody is such a cheese lover as I am. And you do have people that, if you've got friends coming in, they might have a cholesterol problem or they might have a problem with salt. So there we are. Always give them the chance to say no, they don't want any extra cheese. This is what I call peasant cooking. Good, wholesome cooking that doesn't take very long to make, doesn't cost a fortune. Excuse me. Oh dear. I'm just going to cut one piece of the bannock and we will spread the rest later. So let's put some soup in a bowl like that. And I'm going to sprinkle a little Parmesan on there. Fantastic. And then we'll cut the bannock. So The soup mixture will make 8 servings, 8 good servings, and the bannock will make 8 servings. So there's a piece of bannock. This is very hot. I would normally let it cool just a little bit. It's going to crumb, but that's okay. It tastes good when it's crumbly. And a flat-ended knife. So we just spread the bacon mixture into the center, put that on the top, and there is a meal fit for a king. Didn't take long, didn't cost a fortune, but my gosh, it makes you beautifully warm inside and nice and cozy. So thank you very much all for watching. I'd like you to just do me a favor, please. If you like the show, please share it with your friends. And thank you very much for watching Mrs. Calabash Cooks, and we will see you next Friday, same time at 2 p.m. And I will be on air this week on Tuesday for our chat at 7:30. So thank you very much for everybody for watching, and have a safe weekend with all this freezing rain that's being forecast. So thank you very much, everybody. Bye.